Thank you again for purchasing from Tar River Outdoor Products. The feeder comes in 4 package assemblies. The main box will be shrink wrapped. All your feed tubes and hardware assemblies will be inside. You have a top frame that the feeder will sit into, skids, which will be the lower section you can move the feeder about, and then the main support frame. Well, let's get everything unwrapped and see how it comes together. Now that we've got everything unwrapped, let's see what's inside. So you notice there'll be a dual hinge system on the back and a single, which is the front. This is your latching mechanism. So just remove bolt. So in your side, you see there'll be your 6 feeder tubes. And then attached to one of those tubes is your hardware. In your hardware pack, you'll see 16 stainless steel bolts with acorn nuts and screws to affix your feeder tubes, which we'll cover later. And each one of those nuts correspond with a hole that's on the frame, and we'll show you that assembly next. I will start by assembling from the bottom up. This is your top plate. We'll move this to the side. This can be assembled with one person, as I'll show, but it's always better to have a buddy, especially when you go to lift this into the frame. So get your skids somewhat spaced out. Keep in mind there's a square cross member and a round cross member. The round cross member goes towards the top to support the box. Slide that onto skid assembly and do the same for the other. Next, I would go ahead and get everything in place first before I put the nuts on. That way you have some freedom and flexibility to get everything aligned appropriately, and then come back and put your bolts. This may be the tricky part to do by yourself. And just like that, the frame is assembled. Next, we'll put our bolts in. All the frame bolts are the same size, so there won't be any confusion there. One thing to continue to note, just to make sure that round bar is toward the top of the assembly. I use a 17mm impact with a ratchet just to put them together very quickly. They could come apart just as easily, so if you want to move this to another location, you could break it down in those pieces again. One thing to note about your tube before we get these assembled is they just slide up in place into the bottom of the feeder. But you see there's an overhang to keep water intrusion to get down into where your feed is housed, whether that's mineral, whether that's protein or corn. There's also adjustable baffle on the inside, and I'll give you a closer shot in a bit, but basically this can be adjusted on the fly once installed. There's little detents in here that you would turn until it gets into a position that it'll click, and you can adjust the flow rate or completely close off an area of a tube feeder if you want an animal to be on one side or the other based on your stand location. But this is stainless steel plate, so if you are running more corrosive materials, salts, or anything that may be in here, there is no risk of deterioration over time. Now's the fun part, getting the box up into the assembly frame. You have to lift it high enough to slide it down so it straddles these support bars. This was where a buddy would certainly come in handy. It's not unmanageable with 2 people, but I'm going to here do it, show you that it can be done by yourself. Not ideal. Just going to back it up, put it in the truck, and back the truck up to the frame and slide it over. Now the last step is the tube assembly. These just slide onto the nozzles at the bottom, and the hardware that comes with these are just standard Phillips head screws. If you want to opt to ensure water tightness, you can upgrade to just get you some roofing screws with a gasket. These are just 1 inch. Just to pierce through there. It won't affect the flow at all and ensures that you have a watertight seal. Just want to show you, this is the recommended nozzle arrangement that I put in place, and they're angled at a position that they won't impede with one another. So if there's multiple deer feeding at the same time, you won't have that competition. Your bigger bucks feel, of course, more comfortable probably on the end nozzles where they can turn their head sideways without their antlers coming in contact with the metal frame. So that's usually the kick out positions here, and then those in the center. As you notice on each one of these tube assemblies, there's a small indent, and they're spaced equally. There's 3 of those, and that's where you would put your set screws in place. Like I said, I use the ones with the rubber washer. You can use the ones that come with it. You shouldn't see a lot of water entry coming down because it is covered from that lip. And the same with the nozzle ends, if you wanted to replace those with a rubber grommet. This is that feeder flow positioner that I was talking about earlier. So it's spring loaded, so you would push in until you hear the clicks. And typically for corn, you want to leave it wide open. For protein pellets or anything smaller, you might want to reduce the flow quite a bit. It's not going to overrun, but it will allow you to get a little bit longer life out of your protein. But if you're going to put 1,500 pounds of anything in here, you're going to get a good bit of use out of it. So next comes the challenge of backing something up to it and getting 1,500 pounds of shelled corn or protein into this thing. So position it in a location, of course, where you can get a side-by-side or truck easily backed up to it to be able to load that amount. But after that, you'll be able to walk away and leave it for quite a bit and feed them as long as you need, on or off season.